So genetic equilibrium is reached when there are no changes in that allele frequency in a population over time. So if genetic equilibrium, also known as Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, is reached, we're not going to see a population frequency of alleles change in a population over time. So evolution's not going to occur if the population is really large. Evolution's not going to occur if, there is random mating. And if we don't have any mutations in a process and there's no natural selective process and nobody's entering the population, then we will not have evolution occur. But if at least one of these conditions is there, then the population is by all means mathematically evolving. So Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, we already know that populations, if they only have two possible alleles, the P allele and the Q allele, that's going to equal 1. And we know how to calculate this allele frequency with the dominant allele being represented as P and the recessive allele being represented by Q. So when a population is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, we can use the additional equation below to calculate the frequency of genotypes in a population. By using the equation below, which is P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared equals 1. P squared is equal to the genotype frequency of all of the homozygous dominant individuals. That are these guys. And 2PQ is equal to the genotype frequency of the heterozygous individuals. And Q squared is equal to the genotype of all of the recessive individuals. So in our Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium example, let's say I have round heads, which are dominant to the recessive heads, which are cone heads. And so 51% of the individuals in a population have rounded heads. So what's the portion of the 51% that are homozygous if the population is in Hardy-Weinberg? Well, if round heads is dominant and 51% of them have rounded heads, then 49% of them are going to have cone-shaped heads. They're going to be homozygous recessive. So in my case here, my homozygous recessive, Q squared is going to equal 0.49, which is the percentage expressed as a decimal point. It's only when we don't know who the carriers are does it get slightly more complicated. So in turtles, red color is dominant to yellow color. In a population of 241 turtles, 34 of them are yellow. So yellow is the recessive color. And we want to assume that the population is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. So this is 34 of them. They are little r. Then what are the allele frequencies in the percentage of a population genotype within my turtles right here, my 241 turtles? So this is really interesting. If we know how the gene works, and we know how many individuals are in that population are recessive, they're not carrying the dominant trait, then we can determine how many carriers there are. So to figure this out, I like to calculate the frequency first. If I know that there are 34 individuals and there are 241 individuals in all, this is going to give me my Q, right? This is going to give me my recessive allele frequency. Then that's going to give me a recessive frequency allele of 0.14. So we plug that in. What is P if Q is 0.14? And this is supposed to equal 1. P is going to equal, then I get 0.86 is my P. So that is my frequency of the dominant alleles. But remember, these are this guy and this guy. Okay, this is the allele frequency in a population. But remember, I said for the genotype population to be calculated, we want to know what is the each genotype percentage in this population. My Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium equation is p squared plus 2pq plus q squared is equal to 1. All right, I know q. Q is equal to 0.14. But what is q squared? If the allele frequency Q is equal to 0.14, and that allele frequency is the genotype little r frequency, which is Q squared, then we can say that Q is equal to Q squared. So 0.14 is equal to Q squared. How do I get rid of the square? Put that there. And when I do that, I take the square root of 0.14, and I'm going to get Q equals, I get 0.37. Now remember, this is allele frequency, and this equation is genotype frequency. So for my genotype frequency, I already know Q. Now I just need to know P. Well, if P plus Q is 1 and Q is 0.37, then P is 0.63. So for my Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium problem, when I have a population of 241 turtles and 34 of them are yellow, if we assume that this population is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, I can calculate my allele frequencies and I can calculate my genotype frequencies, which we just did. And from my genotype frequencies, I can calculate the percentage of each genotype in the population.